immigration rules about family reunion, which are disgraceful, and in a sense a knock-on from the whole narrative of xenophobia generated by the war on terror. And I'm sure everyone in this room will oppose them just as much as all the people at that meeting will. There was a lot of questions and I had to stay to the end, so I'm sorry about that. But these things are necessary.
Sorry.
When you've got young eyes, you need good glasses. I obviously haven't heard all that's gone on. I just want to say a quick few thoughts to share with you. It's 12 years since the British troops went into Afghanistan, and I was just reflecting on the young man that arrived in my office a few weeks ago, a young guy who had been dropped off a lorry in Finsbury Park in the middle of the night, and that was it. He was a refugee from Afghanistan who had been through hell and high water in goodness knows how many places in order to get away from a place of enormous danger, in order to get to a place of relative safety. And he found Finsbury Park at 3 o'clock in the morning safer than trying to survive in Afghanistan. British troops have been there for 12 years. There's been an invasion, there's been an occupation, there's been an imposition of a government, there's all that. And a young man cannot live safely in that society because of all kinds of complicated job, family, etc. relationships. What have we actually done? What have we actually achieved by this war in Afghanistan for the people of Afghanistan? Then add on to that Bagram Air Base, extraordinary rendition, Guantanamo Bay, Homeland Security in the United States, anti-terror legislation in Britain. Civil liberties have been wrecked at all ends of the spectrum in this, and we've been told that somehow or other this war in Afghanistan is for our good and our security. Well, I tell you this, for young Muslim men, particularly young Muslim men on the streets of Britain, they don't feel safer now than they did in 2001. They're more likely to be picked up, more likely to be stopped by the police, less likely to get a job, more likely to be accused of all kinds of terrible things that they've had nothing to do with and no wish to do with whatsoever. And so I think we can take some pride in the fact that we founded Stop the War Coalition 12 years ago. It should have been in this place, but it's not big enough, wasn't big enough to start it off. And we have brought together an awful lot of people. It is a coalition. Therefore, not everybody's always going to get everything that they want. But we're a coalition of opposition to Western intervention in one country after another, recognising the damage it does to civil liberties at all ends of the scale. The vast profits that are made by arms suppliers, aircraft manufacturers, and all the accoutrements of war that go with it, and the oil, minerals, and other things that come out at the end of it. And I tell you this, if we meet in 5 years' time, I just wonder which companies are going to be developing the mineral wealth of Afghanistan, that mineral wealth that was already recognised by the Russian Imperial High Command in 1892 as being of enormous geopolitical significance. And so we fought against that, and that has built up a big anti-war movement, and Iraq is obviously the huge one, and the huge political error that was made in Britain. But the vote that took place in Parliament on non-intervention in Syria was of enormous significance, and sometimes when in the midst of something quite politically major, you don't always notice it. You really don't necessarily realise how significant it was. Think this thing through. The British government recalls Parliament in order to get endorsement of military action. In every other scenario you can ever think of, it's always been granted. Remember, some of you are old enough to remember when the Falklands War broke out, 1982, Thatcher recalled Parliament on Saturday morning. Tony Benn made a very brave and very brilliant speech against it. The House voted by a vast majority to support that particular war, and I guess Cameron just assumed this was going to be the same case. It was not. He lost that vote, no endorsement was given, therefore Britain can't be involved. The ripple effects of that were huge, absolutely enormous. I'm not saying it was only the UK vote, but the fact that Obama couldn't get it through the Senate or the House in the USA, the fact that the Russian and US foreign ministers had to meet, bring about an agreement on chemical weapons, which I guess all of us welcome. None of us want chemical weapons, they're evil, disgusting things. But if you come to an agreement to get rid of chemical weapons, then surely to God you can come to an agreement for a political solution to the crisis in Syria, to stop the fighting and stop the killing and bring the refugees back home. 100,000 dead and 2 million refugees can't be anything that any of us are pleased or proud of. But I'm very sure that had we not succeeded in defeating the government's plan in the UK Parliament, then just maybe we'd now be in a situation where there would be daily bombing raids from US aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, bombing goodness knows what in Syria. And something tells me that if you bomb a chemical weapons establishment, you're likely to create the fallout, which is a terrible, catastrophic mess. And I'm really bored of lectures about the Western unacceptability of chemical weapons. Of course they're acceptable. So is Agent Orange, unacceptable. So is depleted uranium, unacceptable. So is white phosphorus, unacceptable. All these things are wrong. So maybe we've just emboldened people to say, you can say no to war. There is an alternative. Let's think through very quickly what the alternatives could be for the future. Do we need a Trident nuclear submarine system? Do we need replacement of nuclear weapons in this country? Do we need to spend £100 billion on our own weapons of mass destruction? No. Do we need to be spending £35 billion a year on arms expenditure in order to give us global reach so we can reach anywhere in the world and sort out any problem in the world? No. And also, little secret, we can't afford it. Neither can the USA afford it. So when I was listening very carefully to all these speeches in Parliament, I sat throughout the whole of the debate, all 7.5 hours of it, apart from when John McDonnell and I went off to have beans on toast together. We know how to live it up. We really do. We know what a good time is. With a cup of tea with it, I must be truthful. And they were saying, we are the 4th biggest per capita expenditure on defence anywhere in the world, and we can't afford to get involved in Syria. We don't know what the implications are. We don't know where this thing's going to end. It was a mea culpa moment for those that voted for Iraq, realising they were wrong, wanting to do something to give themselves a bit of credibility for the future. So let's build on that. Build on that by continuing to oppose intervention. Build on that by opposing intervention elsewhere. Build on that by looking at the real causes of war. The injustice, the poverty, the greed, the sales of weapons and all the other things that go with it. And we begin to create a debate of a scenario for peace, for justice, not for war and destruction. That's why Stop the War exists. That's why it's very important that we exist. And it's very important that we bring in everyone that will accept what are fundamentally very ordinary, very basic and very decent demands. A world based on peace, not on war. A world based on justice, not oppression. That's what we exist for. Thank you very much for coming.